Welcome to Athlete Optimization. Reimagine. This is the Restoic podcast.
Welcome back. Danny, I was bummed that I wasn't able to join you guys, but you had a chance to connect with George Bovell, who's a 5-time Olympian, one of the greatest swimmers ever. I mean, this guy is so accomplished and such an interesting person. I just had a chance to listen back to your conversation, and I'm so excited to get this out there into the world. It's wide reaching. I think there's a lot of different directions that this conversation goes. It starts with some athletics, but really George has spent a lot of time post-career to go on this journey of self-actualization. And he talks about this mind, body, and spirit connection and getting to know your horse and becoming the hero of your own story. And there's so much more that went into this conversation. But before I steal all of your thunder, I would just love to ask you, what were some of your highlights from speaking with George?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with some of those comments, but really just going back, he had such a different mentality in our conversation. And it doesn't surprise me when you look at his sports career of why he excelled at such a high level. He thinks differently, he trains differently. And even speaking with him on the podcast, he just touches upon really having hero energy, being the hero of your own story, having that path of self-mastery. But he just really dives into some levels that, most athletes, and really me, for example, I've never even considered. But he puts it plainly, he simplifies things. And just like a lot of our athletes, there's two big things that kind of caught my eye. One, he pushes everybody to get out of your comfort zone. That's where growth happens. He knows that as an athlete. He also knows that as a person. And then two, in terms of your life, your relationships, your sports, your work, everything you do, he brought up the simple question, which I think all of us can reflect on. Whatever you're doing, is it a medicine or is it a poison? So if people in your life are toxic, are they a medicine or a poison? Asking yourself these types of discussions, it's really going to open things up for your own potential. But as far as you just mentioned, it's wide, all these topics that we're going to cover. I think you're going to love it. Ian, is there anything else that caught your eye when you listened to it?
I just feel like this, in a lot of ways, is a black belt discussion, So if you're new to these types of ideas, it may fly over your head, and that's okay. Just be open to hearing someone else's perspective. I think that sometimes is important. You don't have to grasp everything that he's coming at. George has a lot of time, a lot of thought into kind of formulating his approach to not only training and human optimization, and specifically his own optimization, but then also just in terms of his outlook of the world. He's well-traveled, he's well-read, really just an interesting guy. But I just want to make sure I maybe preface it by saying that because yes, he is a deep thinker, he is a decorated athlete, but when he gets into these conversations around living life based on love instead of fear, that's life. Yes, there's part of that that's going to go into sports, but these are just maybe some life lessons. And I think when you hear it from someone like him, who has been a 5-time Olympian, it hits a little bit of a different way. But the conversation does go a lot of different places, right? It is a longer chat. I love these types of podcasts, but it's, I think, sometimes good to set the stage as we get into that conversation. And so that's, I guess, the last thing I would say. Danny, before we get going, is there anything else you want to mention about your chat with George?
No, you said it perfectly. Everyone who's listening, be open-minded, understand that everyone ticks differently. And it's just always exciting to pick the brain of, again, 5-time Olympians. Not every day you come across somebody like that.
And without further ado, enjoy this episode with George Bovell.
We are thrilled to have a special guest today in swimming legend George Bovell, whose impressive resume includes, now hold your breath, 5-time Olympian, former world record holder, Olympic bronze medalist, 5-time NCAA champion, 25-time All-American, philanthropist, and all-around good guy. George, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to share your story and be with us.
Thank you, Danny. It's a great honor and pleasure to be on your show today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into our chat, I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing what you've been up to post-career and really how you're making the most out of your time with obviously uncertainty with COVID, but just everything else going on in the world.
Yeah, well, post-career, I was starting a business importing orthopedic braces. and had the agency for this brand from Germany for the whole Caribbean. Then I realized that it was not what I wanted to do. It was just an expression of kind of like my programming. And the whole thing was based on fear. It was all about seeking security, but it had nothing to do with what I really wanted. And when I realized this, I kind of vowed never to make a decision based on fear and to really explore why I wanted to do things. And then I set out on I made a list of everything I wanted to do, kind of like a list of what the hero of my story would do. And I went one by one, systematically pursuing these different things. And there were basically a bunch of things that I wanted to learn about. And it included things like I became an instructor of free diving. And to do that, it's kind of like becoming an underwater stuntman, basically. You have to do some very dangerous, crazy things. But it was a great opportunity to continue that path of self-mastery, of getting more control over my organism that I had been working on while I was in competitive sport. And then I realized that I found a system for health optimization. So when I was an athlete, I was always trying to optimize my health. How can I get more healthy? Because I understood that the more healthy I was, the better I would perform, the better I would think, the better I would feel, the faster I would recover. But unfortunately, I think the current approach is really based on consumerism. And this whole wellness industry is all about making you buy a bunch of things that you don't really need. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I found Ayurveda, which is it means life knowledge in Sanskrit. It's known to be like ancient Indian plant medicine, but it is so much more. It is there are these ancient texts that basically were written by very high yogis, very wise men, and they are operating manuals for having a Homo sapien organism. What to feed it, when to go to bed, when to wake up, how to take care of it to just bring about like human thriving on all levels. So once I started to go into this from my own experience, because while we were athletes, we have a very objective way to measure our performance, to measure how we're doing, how healthy am I, how fast am I recovering, because you can see how strong you are in the gym. You can see how fit you are in the pool or in the track or whatever sport. And you're always measuring yourself. You're always testing yourself. So from my own experience, what I started to learn about Ayurveda just made so much sense from the years of paying attention to my organism and trying to optimize it. So when I got into this, I just couldn't get enough of it. I spent a few months reading everything I could read and watching everything I could watch on YouTube, while I was pursuing some other things. I was becoming a permaculture designer. Then I went and studied hypnosis and NLP, taking different courses in these different fields from the best teachers I could find. And then I wanted to go and learn Ayurveda, really learn it, not in an academic way. I wanted to learn it in the traditional way that it was taught for thousands of years, kind of like a lineage. You go and you learn in what's called the Gurukul system. And it's very different from Western academic learning, as I later found out. So I got connected to a great famous Ayurvedic doctor, and he's treated like great dignitaries. He used to run an Ayurvedic hospital. Now he's kind of retired. And he takes students sometimes. And I think it was my Olympic credentials as an Olympic medalist, as a person who broke a world record, kind of unlocked this door for me, because it showed him that I was somebody who would follow through with things and would be a serious student. So he took me on, but he didn't take me as a student. They take you as an apprentice. And one of the first things he told me was, I don't give certificates. And then initially, like that Western kind of the ego side of things, it felt I needed to prove that I knew my stuff. Initially was a little bit apprehensive, being like, no certificate, what am I doing? I have to turn off the kettle, excuse me. Be right back.
No problem at all. And it's amazing. I mean, just hearing that transition, and really what stands out to me the most is just your path of self-mastery has not been limited to athletics. You're pushing yourself, and that's, I think, what every athlete should hope for, because no matter how good you are, the father time is undefeated, as they say, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I went and decided to go in all the way. If something's worth doing, it's really worth doing all the way. So I went and basically went and lived with this doctor and his family in a small city in South India, Tamil Nadu. And I started to learn. And in the beginning, it's all about recognizing patterns. And you learn to see for yourself. You learn to, it's like a new way of seeing, and it's not something you can memorize. It's something that you actually have to understand. When you understand, you know. You don't need to memorize. And it tied in with an interest of mine since the early 2000s. One of my passwords was the word shaman. I always thought that ethnobotany was so interesting. Just how there were these wise men in the jungle and they knew all about healing and everything. So I went into that, got introduced to that through a famous ethnobotanist. And all this was stuff I was pursuing after I retired from sport. And I found that Ayurveda and traditional Amazonian medicine are both really talking about the same truth. And you find it also in traditional Chinese medicine. And like, as they say, like the divine science is the same truth everywhere. So I've been on a journey of really exploring Amazonian medicine and, of course, Ayurveda. And while I was in India studying Ayurveda, I've been 3 trips and then multiple months at a time. And the teacher of mine, he's also a big Vedic scholar and a big yoga practitioner of a direct lineage from great Himalayan masters, So in disciplic succession, I learned real yoga, classical hatha yoga, and all these pranayama exercises that I do every day. And I realized this is just enlightened exercise. And as my teacher said, why you want to run around outside and get sweaty when you can just do some of these pranayama exercises? And they have a host of benefits for the body and the mind. And without a lot of the drawbacks, you get, you don't burn calories, but it revs up your metabolism. It cleans your body. It improves your digestion, your immunity, releases endorphins. It makes you feel really good. So I'm also pursuing that as well. And it's kind of a continuation of what I was doing in swimming, which is a path to self-mastery. And since then, more and more tools have come to me. And now I start to teach some people. What else have I been doing along the way? Wonder like, what do I do for work? I got into cryptocurrency like Bitcoin a while back. And this is what I do. I trade cryptocurrencies, which requires a lot of self-mastery because you have to be totally in control of your emotions. Like if you follow your emotions, you'll be buying at the worst time when it's like the most dangerous. And then you'll be selling at the time when you should be buying. You'll be following the herd, which is just running on emotions.
And that's incredible. I'm not knowledgeable in that field of cryptocurrency, but I've heard amazing things. And obviously, with anything we do, we're all pursuing self-mastery. And one thing that I really loved about what you just shared is you're doing methods that aren't really traditional in a sense of what, I guess the Western world would pursue, but it's been around for so long. And so, even on the topic of what makes you tick and what makes you really excel from the swimming world until now, it's thinking differently. Your mentality is differently. And when you mentioned, the hero of your own story, I'd love to just take a moment, and I'm always interested. I'm sure the listeners are as well. But what's your story as a child? How did you get into swimming? How did you kind of see that mental shift? And when did you really realize that, wow, I have a future in this?
Well, I started swimming. I'm from Trinidad originally, Trinidad and Tobago. And you have to understand that in the 90s, like swimming in Trinidad was very, very third world. Up until recently, we didn't have a really world-class pool. There were times when I would go to practice and the pool would be green and the pH would be terrible. You get air infections and rashes from the pool. It was just filthy. It was dirty. And I was doing it with a couple of kids. I loved swimming. I really did. I've always loved the water. And coming from a place like that, you don't have anybody to look up to as a real role model, as someone who's ever really done anything great in the sport. So it's very difficult to really conceptualize like going to the Olympics or becoming a world-class swimmer. I was just working as hard as I could with the limited resources that I had. And I'm the exception that made it, And I like to think that Trinidad produces a lot of great athletes, mostly in track and field, but they do well despite being from Trinidad, not because they're from Trinidad, because the culture of Trinidad really celebrates mediocrity and hedonism. And that makes it very hard to be exceptional in any sport that you want to do, because the group, the culture, it's all about doing as little as possible. And if something is hard, avoiding it and seeking pleasure. So that was a big challenge I had to face growing up. And I had some lucky breaks along the way, that helped me. And then I had a chance to go and swim in America at a high school there in Florida. And then was recruited to Auburn University, and I swam under some great coaching there. And it kind of grew progressively.
That's incredible. And I love the fact that you obviously saw the limitations not as necessarily a roadblock, but as an opportunity. And that's, I think we should all take notes from that, because right now, I mean, a lot of the athletes you're looking at, especially the younger ones, are really limited in what they can do with all the restrictions because of COVID. And I think the last thing we want them to do is look at this as time lost, but rather as an opportunity to excel and maybe educate yourself, maybe do yoga, do mental fitness, try different things that are obviously going to not stop you from being better, and really looking at it as, I want to take responsibility, I want to take accountability, and I want to make the most out of this. So that's pretty incredible that you're sharing that you had that mentality as a young athlete, which is wow.
Yeah, I think you said something there, take responsibility and take accountability. And I think that that's one thing that Trinidad did give me, is I had to take responsibility for my swimming very early. There was nobody to follow there. Nobody really knew that much about it. So I was empowered to learn. And this is before the internet. We were borrowing VHS tapes of pop-off swimming and trying to copy what they were doing, what he was doing.
What about in terms of a support system? I know that it's hard. You're trying to educate yourself. You're trying to use all the resources that you can find. But was there a coach that kind of gave you the extra push? Or was it your parents, friends?
Mm-hmm. I had some coaches that helped me, yes, definitely. Edward Tuberoso, Hayden Noalo, Anil Roberts are some of the names. And but it's very difficult. What really gave me the break was I had an opportunity to go to a school in Florida. And I think that's where I really started to excel, being in an environment where people wanted excellence. Mm-hmm. Where mediocrity wasn't celebrated. Excellence was kind of like what we were pursuing.
I love it. And then you went over to Auburn, where you just absolutely demolished competition, had an incredible career there. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Actually,
when I was swimming in the Caribbean, we would swim every event at every competition. We didn't know any better. That's just what we did. And I would go to some of these Caribbean island swimming championships, and I would swim every race. And I had a winning streak that lasted years. I can't remember how many years now. And it took me all the way up until the World Championship heats. In 2001, I had just turned 18, I think. Yeah. And I ended up coming fourth in the finals at the World Championships. In the heats and semifinals, I was beating the Olympic champion, because I had this winning streak that I couldn't break. And that really opened the door for me to get the attention from college coaches, and then be able to be recruited, offered scholarships and things like this. That was my breakout at the World Championships in 2001. And then I think the US NCAA system is fantastic. The environment that they create, the way you have a team of people with a like-minded obsession. And we have to be honest, I look back at my swimming career and I think that, I was a fanatic. And when you're a fanatic, you never know you're a fanatic because you're surrounded by other fanatics. I mean, it's not normal to get up at 5 and go and like crush yourself in the pool and then go to school and then do it again in the afternoon. But when you're in that environment, you don't know it's hard. It's just normal. And because you don't know it's hard, I think that makes it so much mentally easier.
Speaking of mental, the fact that you were on that massive win streak, then you ended up getting fourth at the World Championships. I think all athletes need to work on how they're going to recover, because when things are great, everything's easy. When you get punched in the mouth, then you have to figure out, what do I do? And so for you, how was that moment of, I guess, the streak being over, but also your reaction to it moving forward?
I mean, I was not bothered by the streak being over because it far exceeded my greatest expectations, the result of coming fourth in the world. But you're right, very often it is harder to handle. The mental aspect is so interesting. You see people who have injuries and the body will recover, but the mind still hasn't recovered. They've lost a kind of deep belief in themselves and deep confidence. And that takes years sometimes to get back. And I have gone through that myself with many injuries. One of them even ended my career in one event that I was the world record holder, Olympic medalist in. And I had to reinvent myself in a different event. That was the 200 IM. And then I had a knee injury and I tore my PCL, popped it, and couldn't do breaststroke anymore. And had to kind of reinvent myself and go through a long and difficult process of building up my confidence in a new race, because I think fundamentally your organism is capable of doing incredible things, but you need a very strong mind to be able to push your organism outside of its comfort zone. And it's hard to go outside the comfort zone all of a sudden. You need to actually believe that you can. And gradually you kind of push your organism a little bit further. And you say, oh, I did that, I can handle that. And on a deep subconscious level, you're not afraid of going that little bit further outside the comfort zone. And gradually, through usually years of pushing yourself gradually further outside the comfort zone, you end up bringing about these fantastic performances. And we have to remember too that when you push yourself further outside the comfort zone mentally and physically, that's where we have the most adaptation. So it's the act of going outside the comfort zone that makes you better. And by going outside the comfort zone, you have the mental belief in yourself to push yourself a little bit further next time.
I love it. That's incredible advice. I think all of us should take heed to that. Question for you though, what was your process of trying to initially get out of your comfort zone? Because we're all creatures of habit, obviously, and I played basketball myself, and the idea of shifting something, or in your case, shifting an event from an injury, how does that work for you? What was the initial step? Did you have kind of process goals moving through it, or did you just kind of take that courageous move?
I think there's so many elements involved, and it comes down to how healthy you are in terms of body, mind, and spirit. That's how fast you will recover. I want to take us on a little segue here and introduce a concept that might be very useful for the viewers and young athletes. So, I mentioned earlier that I've been very interested in traditional Amazonian medicine. And I have a teacher, and I've spent many months in the jungle dieting plants to learn about this science. And from the perspective of traditional Amazonian medicine, they would look at health in a very holistic way. If we look at health and sickness, anything in nature that is healthy, it is so strong, it's thriving. Anything that is sick in nature, it's weak. So, for example, a really healthy gazelle in its prime can eat grass right in front of the lion. And the lion knows not even to try to waste its energy to chase that gazelle. And the gazelle, because it knows it's so strong and so healthy, it has this inner trust in itself. It knows it's healthy on a very deep level, so it trusts that it's capable of handling whatever happens. And it exudes a kind of confidence. And it knows that if the lion even lurched at it, it would be gone and not a problem. And the lion senses that too, so the lion doesn't try. The lion creeps around the grass and looks for the old and the weak and the sick gazelle, try to take that out. So anything that is really healthy is really strong. Now, if we apply this holistic approach to health and sickness, we have to look at like body, mind, and spirit, because Ayurveda and traditional Amazonian medicine, these things will tell you that your body and your mind are not separate. It is a sick mind that makes a sick body. And get this too, when you're healthy, you naturally want what's good for you. Because your mind is healthy, you think in very healthy ways. And you go after what's good for you, which makes you more healthy. And that makes you more strong. Your willpower gets stronger. And not only is health strength, health is also self-awareness. It is situational awareness. It is self-control. It is intelligence. It's higher consciousness. It's having more control over your organism in the way that a rider has a lot of control over a horse. You can push your organism to do what you want to do with intentional action instead of just instinctual reaction. Now, let's look at sickness. So as you get sick, body and mind and spirit, when you're sick, you think in sick ways. You want what's bad for you. You want poison, which makes you even sicker, which makes you want more of what's bad for you, which makes you even sicker. And this is what's behind addiction. You want poison. Let's say you start smoking crack. You're going to get sick. You're going to want more of that crack, which is going to make you more sicker. And then you're going to go into all kinds of terrible things. And your life is going to fall apart. And that's like decay. That's sickness. If you look at sickness, it's weakness. You have a lack of willpower. You are lazy. You are not creative. You can't think properly. And you run like an animal on instincts. When things get difficult, you give up. When things are offering pleasure, you chase the pleasure immediately. And when you're sick, you tend to operate on a very low level of consciousness. So you're always chasing short-term gain, long-term pain. And you have weak willpower. And when you're sick, you speak to yourself in poisonous language, which makes you even sicker. So let's say you're in an event and things get difficult. That's when, because you're sick, you're going to start to speak to yourself in words that poison you, that make you weaker, that take away your power. Words that maybe make you doubt yourself, make you feel you're not worthy, make you feel you're not prepared, make you feel that you're incapable. And because of you use those words, we have to remember the word is not just a piece of language. A word is a package of emotion with corresponding energy. So it's like when you need to be the most strong, you're giving yourself poisonous language, poison pills to weaken you. So in its totality, sickness, it's death energy, it's defeat, it is slavery. It is working a 9-to-5 job that you hate, and any chance you have, you try to escape from your miserable life with intoxicants or illusions on Netflix. And you're caught in this slavery. You can't face reality. You can't actually make a change. And unfortunately, we live in a very sick culture. We have to understand that our culture is very sick, and we have to have the courage to realize that if we're from a sick culture, then we too are sick in many ways. And it's very difficult to see the ways that we are sick. And if we want to heal, we have to first look at our sickness. But so we said sickness, a body, mind, and spirit is weakness. It's decay, it's laziness, it's passivity, it's instinctual reactions, it's unconsciousness. You're not aware of how your actions affect the bigger picture as a whole. You're like an animal. And you have a miserable life as a slave. Now it's defeat energy, it's death energy. So when the gazelle is sick, the lion knows it's sick, and the gazelle knows, oh my gosh, I can't get away, it's going to get me. And the lion knows that, and of course it dies. The gazelle dies, gets eaten. That's the way of nature. Sick things get taken out of the ecosystem. That's just the way nature works. So let's look at health again. When you're healthy, you're strong, You have willpower. The more healthy you are in body, mind, and spirit, the more willpower you have. With that health comes higher consciousness. You're more self-aware. You're more understanding of how your organism's instincts might be trying to influence you. And then you can take conscious action, intentional action, very often for short-term pain, long-term gain. It is the opposite of passivity and laziness. It's activity, it's hero energy, it's victory energy, it is life energy in its totality. It's power. Health is power. Sickness is weakness and decay. So we need to look at our life in a holistic way and say, all right, in my life, am I consuming? Am I trying to be great and I'm consuming some medicinal things in my life? While at the same time, I'm consuming all these poisons. I'm escaping from my life with Netflix and Instagram. I'm poisoning myself with intoxicants. Keeping bad company with people who pull me down. I'm eating food that is just making me sick. It's not medicine food, it's poison food. And then what type of language am I using? Am I speaking to myself in poisonous words that take my power away? Saying I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm not ready. And if you look at your life in a very holistic way, and you look at the ways that you're making decisions that, remember, when we're healthy, we want what's good for us, which makes us more healthy, which makes us more strong, more powerful, more willpower, more self-awareness, more self-control, self-mastery, victory energy. Or am I sick and I'm making decisions that make me more sick and weaken me? And if we want to be our greatest versions of ourselves in our family life, in our career, in our sport, our life can only be an expression of us. Our sporting performance can only be an expression of us. So the more healthy we are, the better our performance will naturally be, because we'll be so much more powerful. We'll have so much more control over ourselves, so much more confidence, so much more belief. And a strong mind is not easily tempted with excuses, with temptations. And a weak mind, a sick mind, is very easily tempted by the excuse and temptations. Oh, I'll have a drink, or I'll just pull out my phone and check Instagram again. That's a weak mind. It has very little self-control. You have very little power over yourself. And a strong mind, you control you. No matter what happens outside, you think what you want to think, you feel how you want to feel. And instead of you reacting to the environment like an animal, you have this type of power where the environment actually begins to react to you, because you're in conscious control over your organism and the mind. And this is where the strong spirit is, that power, that willpower. A healthy mind thinks in healthy ways, which wants what's good for us. And we have to understand that what we put in our body, Ayurveda talks about this over and over and over again. We also put in our mind, because the brain chemistry can only be an expression of the nervous system and the physiology. And it's even down to the state that we allow our nervous system to exist in. Can be a poison. If you're allowing your nervous system to get stressed, your horse, your organism, but is reacting to its environment all the time. But this organism, this biorobot, this Homo sapien that I'm embodying, this was evolved to survive in a time that it was caveman days. It doesn't understand that screens with flashing lights that's not real. Doesn't understand that traffic. And these things stress it. So let's say you're looking at a drama on Netflix. Your organism doesn't, on a subconscious level, does not know that is not real. And it creates a stress in the body. The drama, the violence, the betrayal, all the stuff that makes it exciting, stresses your organism. You drink coffee, stresses your organism. Your nervous system is moving towards survival mode. And anytime the nervous system moves towards survival mode, your breathing is shallow, your body language is closed, your facial muscles are tense. Now we have so many nerves in our face. If you even frown a little bit, it sends a very powerful message to your nervous system that everything is not okay. But if you even turn up the corners of your mouth, it sends the opposite message that everything's okay. And it's like you telling your horse, everything is fine, relax, baby. So when we're existing in a state where our nervous system is in survival mode, it can be, from the perspective of holistic health, it's a poison, because our organism is prioritizing short-term survival over long-term survival and maintenance. So we're watching out for danger, ready to react, instead of allowing our body's natural intelligence and these processes that were designed to care for it to work properly. We're inhibiting our body's own intelligence that wants to repair itself and wants to rejuvenate itself and wants to clean itself, wants to heal itself, it wants to delete bad copies of itself. When you get stressed, you're not allowing any of that to take place. And if you really control your organism and you keep your organism in the optimum state where all these processes are functioning properly and you're thinking properly, you're recovering all day long. You'll actually need significantly less sleep. But if you're stressed all the time, allowing an environment that is quite unnatural to stress your subconscious organism so that it prioritizes short-term survival instead of long-term maintenance and upkeep, then you're going to age a lot faster. You're going to have so much more cortisol and adrenaline. And we all know what happens to people who work very stressful jobs. They get confused and think that money is real wealth instead of health is real wealth. They make a lot of money, but they get cancer, they get heart disease, diabetes, strokes, high blood pressure, because the organism is always existing in this state of prioritizing short-term survival instead of long-term maintenance and rejuvenation. So this concept of health and sickness and poison and medicine and poison applies to everything. And if you want to be the best version of yourself, best in your sporting performance, in terms of power of mind and body, because the body won't go where the mind won't push it. The body is like a faithful horse that will give its last breath for you. If the mind, the rider of the horse, has enough willpower to push it that far, we get more willpower. We have more control over our horse as the rider of the horse. And if you want to be the best athlete, you can't only train your organism, you have to also train the rider of the horse, the mind. Increase the willpower. You have to increase your overall capacity for power as an individual. Your health in terms of the greatest context of health and power. And there are many ways to do this.
Amazing. I couldn't agree more. I think that the biggest thing you were talking about is I'm a big believer in energy. I think a lot of athletes are coming around to that eventually. But what you mentioned before is really having the willingness to look at yourself in the mirror, be honest with yourself, ask yourself some difficult questions. And everything you just said there makes complete sense. But from, let's say, a high school or a college athlete who's hearing this, what would you consider the initial steps in terms of actually embracing this philosophy, living it, and seeing the benefits?
All right. First, we need to understand that our life is an expression of our mind, that our life is an expression of us. And the more healthy we are, the better people we are, the better our life will be. The stronger we are in terms of health, health is also strength. Anything in nature that is healthy is strong. A plant, animal, whale, fish, it doesn't matter. Health is strength. So the more healthy we make ourselves in terms of body and mind and spirit, the more success we're going to have in all areas. It is victory energy. And of course, to be healthy, we need to take medicines. We need to take we need to want the things that make us even more healthy. And we need to not want the things that are bad for us. But of course, we need to understand that when we're sick, we don't think in healthy ways. We think in sick ways, and we want what's bad for us, which makes us sicker. So we need to take a holistic look at our life and say, all right, I'm going to try to incorporate more of the things that strengthen me and make me more healthy. And I'm going to try to cut out a lot of the things that weaken me and pull me down. And you need to go through, and it's no sense trying to take one step forward when you're taking 2 steps back. So if you're going to do something, you have to do it all the way. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time and you're exhausting yourself and you're going through the motions. And you have to understand as well that our culture is so sick that it wants to keep you sick. It wants to keep you passive. It wants to keep you unconscious. And you can't compare yourselves to regular people if you want to be exceptional. If you're a high school athlete and you want to be great, you can't look at what your friends in high school are doing. They're going to have mediocre lives. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard. You can't expect to have greatness and hold yourself to the normal standard of mediocre morality.
You have to commit to it fully, like you mentioned before. And what you're saying actually resonates as well, because we recently read a research by NCAA Sports Institute stating that the student athletes in college report mental health and wellness as their number one challenge. And so everything you're saying, it makes sense. And even from like a very simple point of view, what you eat affects how you feel. And, if you get that sugar addiction, like me, I have a problem. I love cookies and my girlfriend bakes incredible cookies. So there's trouble in that. But, the more you eat it, the worse you feel and you become addicted to it. And that's just one example. But ultimately, as an athlete, I'm sure you agree, what you put into your body, you'll feel pretty quickly. And if you are having a race or a competition, if you're not eating the right way, it's going to directly affect how you perform. But it is a systemic problem in the way that we're wired and the way that the things we're eating with fast food, especially, it's become so simple and there's instant gratification to it. But, the long-term punishment is there as well.
That's that short-term gain, long-term pain. And that's an example of sickness. When you're sick, you want that greasy pizza with cheese that is either mostly synthetic or it's from sick cows that are pumped full of hormones and antibiotics, with salami from sick pigs that were just kept in factory farms, fed GMO corn and GMO soy. When you're sick, you want what's bad for you, which makes you sicker. When you're healthy, there's something very interesting about a healthy organism, is that when you have a certain amount of health, your body's own intelligence starts to work really well. And your body will actually tell you what it needs. It'll tell you, I'm not feeling very hungry at all. And you listen to your body and say, okay, my body maybe wants to do a little fast for 24 hours and clean itself. Or your body will tell you, I need something bitter greens, or I need something sour. And your body's telling you what it needs because each taste has a different amino acid profile. And your body's telling you, I need some of this stuff, I need some of that. And as you get more and more healthy, you will naturally want what's good for you, and you'll be able to listen, trust your own organism's intelligence that's functioning properly. To say, yes, I need a little bit more fatty food. I want to eat some chia seeds. I want some walnuts. I want some avocado. I need to cook with a little more coconut oil. Got a little dryness in my body. My joints are cracking. Your body will tell you what it needs. And it is amazing, the intelligence of the organism when it is working properly.
That's amazing. I'm starting to educate myself more and more on that. But unfortunately, during my own playing career, I didn't monitor that. I thought I was eating healthy. I thought I was doing the right things. And I think that's probably a common issue with a lot of athletes. They think they're doing the right things, but not doing the homework and really being proactive. Because a lot of the stuff you're saying right now, quite frankly, is new to me. And I'm assuming for many people it is. But at the same token, you've educated yourself on this and you're a prime example of it. I mean, your resume as an athlete stands for itself, but where you are today is also a testament to doing things the right way, listening to your body. And it appears like, in a way, you're rewiring yourself to a much healthier version of George, which I think we should all do.
It's always a spiral. It is either you're spiraling up. Everything is a feedback loop. You want to talk about energy? Energy is a feedback loop. When you're healthy, you want what's good for you, which makes you more healthy and strong, which makes you want more of what's good for you. And you spiral up to greatness. When you're sick, you want what's bad for you, which makes you weaker and less conscious, more passive, more lazy, which makes you sicker, which makes you make worse decisions, which makes you even sicker, and you spiral down to destruction. And very few people are actually consciously aware of these feedback loops. And in different periods of their life, they get in a nice upward spiral and they have success. And then maybe a relationship or something difficult happens and it pulls them down and they start to spiral down. And you look at many careers and they go like this, instead of consciously being aware of the whole system of how health and sickness works on this holistic approach, and cultivating consciously upward spirals. So even if you get hurt, you'll recover faster. You're going to speak to yourself in like Conor McGregor language instead of defeated loser language, you know? And when you're really healthy, you're going to believe 100% that you can do this challenge. You can achieve it with zero doubt. I'm talking about certainty. Like that gazelle is certain that that lion can't touch it, because it knows on such a deep level how healthy it is and how powerful it is. It knows on a very deep, deep inner level that's subconscious. It trusts itself. When you have that, that's when you have that invincible champion energy. Like, you just know you have it, and because you know you have it, you have it. There's zero doubt. At the moment you take that shot, I know like you're a pro basketball player, Danny. I know, like, let's say you're going to shoot a 3. At the moment you release that, if there's even like a sliver of like 0.071% doubt, it's going to miss, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So part of that willpower is that certainty. You guarantee the future. That's health. And what's very interesting about this is that when any animal, any being has this type of health, this type of power, they feel very safe and comfortable. They feel safe. They trust themselves on a very deep level because they know they're strong. And everything is easier when you're strong. And they know that whatever happens, they got it. And when you have this energy, it allows you to be very gentle outside. You don't need to have a big tough guy front, because you know you're so strong inside, you can be very gentle outside. And other people in your presence on a very deep level, their nervous systems, their mirror neurons will react to your calm energy, that assurance that you radiate. And you'll be magnetic. People will want to follow you because their organism is programmed to want to feel safe. And you make them feel safe, so they will want to follow you and listen to you. And this is the principle behind leadership, natural leadership in nature, which is leading without dominating. It's where they want to follow, not because they're forced to follow through disciplinary action. And this
it's not fear-based.
Yes, this is what is one expression of health. Health is leadership. It is power. You guarantee the future. You guarantee that it's going to be good for yourself and for everybody else.
So what's your thought on how we can change this? Because there needs to be clearly a lot of education. And from the NCAA, they do a wonderful job in so many aspects. They have so many resources for the athletes, but they're also falling short in other areas. And that's no fault of their own. It just comes back down to you don't know what you don't know.
Firstly, we have to realize our culture is very sick. And I'll take us on a little segue to give us a little background. Okay, do you know in slavery days, slave owners didn't want the slaves to learn to read? Because then they'd realize this is not right. I'm a slave. This is not how it should be. So if we go long ago into ancient China, ancient Egypt, a civilization was like a people farm. And they would go and they would capture a bunch of wild tribal people and bring them into the civilization, into the people farm. And if you were wild and free, and now you're in chains, and now you're forced to do things, you don't like it. You resist it. But let's say it's the great-grandkids of the people who were caught and brought in. They're born into this system. They never see it for what it is. They just accept it. And they go along with it, and they're purposely kept ignorant and kept distracted. Now, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient China, it was really built on slaves. Then in the Middle Ages, we didn't really call them slaves anymore. We called them serfs and peasants. And the people who lived in the castle on the hill farmed these people down below. And they generated a lot of surplus. And through force and intimidation, and by keeping them ignorant, they siphoned off a lot of the surplus. And they would fight. These people in the castle on the hill would fight those people 30 valleys and hills away, fight the people who lived in that castle on that hill to try to get more control over the livestock that they could farm, the human livestock. Now, in this modern age, we have to understand that, yes, we don't have slaves anymore. We don't have serfs and peasants. But the system continues. We just call them citizens today, and we call them taxpayers. We have to understand that the system today wants to keep us very ignorant. It wants to keep us disempowered. It wants to keep us unconscious so that we just react to whatever's happening from instinct. We are herded and exploited like farm animals. And it wants to keep us entertained and distracted. And there's so many things that just, it's all about entertainment, Netflix, sports, Instagram, Facebook. And if we really want to be healthy, we have to take ownership of our lives and say, all right, well, where am I going? What am I doing? How do I feel about this? And if you have free time, you can't just pick up your phone and escape into your illusions. Let me sit and let me pay attention to my organism. How do I feel? Is my organism stressed? And throughout the day, you need to go and checking in with your horse, with your organism, and relaxing it. And the more the horse is relaxed, the more the horse will listen to the rider. And to relax your organism, you want to breathe it. You want to tell the nervous system that everything's okay. And breathe it, open its body language. Take your tongue down off of the roof of your mouth. Relax your facial muscles. Breathe. And these send very powerful signals to your nervous system, which affects your brain chemistry, which affects your emotional state, which affects your energy. And to do this is to start to take control of yourself. A very small way at first, by consciously relaxing your organism when it gets stressed. And in this way, I'll use this as an example. Let's say, talking about a rider and a horse. Me and you, we are all like riders and horses. Let's say I have 3 beer. That's like the rider is letting go the reins of the horse. The horse has a little more control, a little bit more instincts, having more sway over our decision making. Then let's say I have 3 more drinks and I give up the stirrups. I'm just squeezing the horse with my knees. And I'm just kind of holding on. And our horse is becoming less conscious, less self-aware, and more of the instincts are coming out and starting to be expressed. Fight, flight, be in the group, be high status in the group, survive, procreate, all the instincts. Then I have 3 more drinks and I give up the saddle. I'm just along for the ride. The horse is in full control. Then maybe I have 3 more drinks. Now I fall off the horse. My horse is galloping in traffic. My horse is trying to kick down things. I don't even know what my horse is doing. So we need to try to cultivate the opposite, where we want, instead of our mind and our self-awareness shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, we want to try to cultivate opposite, where our mind and self-awareness and self-control is constantly expanding. We're less distracted. We're more self-aware. We're aware of how we're feeling, how we're thinking. And then we're consciously controlling ourselves to bring about health, medicine, strength, power. And so instead of losing all the equipment to ride the horse, it's like I'm getting apps that I can see the horse's blood pressure, heart rate. I can see what's happening with the horse's endocrine system. I can understand the emotions that the horse is feeling, and then how those emotions might want to pull the horse to do this. And I, as the rider, have to be in control so my horse doesn't make a decision like an animal for short-term gain, long-term pain. And I can steer my horse towards long-term gain and with a little short-term pain. And I can push my horse through the outside of its comfort zone for that little short-term pain, because the horse is programmed, the organism, the biorobot, the meat is programmed by nature to avoid getting outside the comfort zone, because that, for our ancient ancestors, meant danger, that meant death. So we got to take control of ourselves back, and the system is designed to take control away from us, to disempower us. That'll be the first step to getting good health. And this is the difference between having a life based on fear, where you're operating on instincts that are driven by fear of not being good enough, fear of not being in the group, fear of not being high status in the group, fear of not procreating. Everything is based on fear. And of course, marketing kicks in and consumerism to sell us things that we are programmed to believe will make us more high status in the group, make us more appealing to the opposite sex. But if we can rise above that, transcend above all those instincts to what Maslow would call self-actualization, then we take control over our horse and we start to make decisions like, all right, what do I really want? Not what the programming of the sick culture tells me I want. What do I really want? And this is where you start to have a life based on love instead of fear. Doing what you love, with who you love, where you love, how you love, and giving yourself as a gift of love to the world that you love, so when your time comes, you can die complete. I'm talking about hero energy, victory energy. This is what I mean by health and strength and power and self-awareness and higher consciousness that comes with health from a holistic perspective. But if we follow the sickness, because our culture's sick, it wants to keep you passive, it wants to keep you distracted, it wants to keep you lazy and entertained, so that you end up living like a slave out of fear, doing a 9-to-5 job that makes you miserable, and any free time you have, because you have a life as a slave doing something that makes you miserable, you want to escape from your life any chance you get through illusions on TV or Instagram or intoxicants. And even if you do make a lot of money doing this thing, living as a slave that makes you miserable 9 to 5, you will never be happy, because your way of life is fundamentally life as a slave. It's not who you are. It's not authentic self-expression.
Being able to disconnect from that false reality is key. I mean, I have those experiences myself where I love going camping. I love getting away, and my friends are like, "Yeah, that's awesome. You're disconnecting from life, from the job, the phone, internet, all that good stuff." And I get where they're coming from that, but I'm also reconnecting with myself. I don't look at it as I'm disconnecting. I'm reconnecting. I'm disconnected when I have the phone in my hand, or when I'm scrolling aimlessly through social media, which does nothing but make me feel worse. But that's kind of been ingrained in us. And the troubling part with that is the athletes that I work with regularly, whether it's teams or individual athletes, fear of failure, self-doubt, all of that is very much deeply ingrained in them. And there's no real logic there, because if you look at it logically, well, your results have gotten you to play Division I. Your results have gotten you on varsity, whatever the case might be. There's so many things you can look towards to say, okay, this is empowering. This is helping me. I have confidence. I've succeeded already in so many ways. But instead, we're focused on areas that we're deficient. We're focused on areas that we just aren't the strongest. And that's problematic, because then, like you said earlier, the self-talk and those inner thoughts are really tearing you down, because at the core of it, how you think affects how you feel. How you feel affects how you play basketball or swim. So it would behoove you to actually reframe that thought process. But what you're saying, it's very deeply ingrained. And the tough part, from my perspective of how do I coach, athletes, it's a massive change, but it starts with one minor thing. And I think for me personally, it would have to be taking responsibility, taking accountability, looking at yourself and saying, okay, I'm not going to be focused on things that are out of my control. I'm not going to be focused on what he or she said. I'm more so focused on me and what I can do. And there is this sense of empowerment, because you're no longer fixated on things that are not within your control, but rather you. And I make the decision to wake up at 5 a.m. before I go to class. And then I make the decision to train after class. And for you, that decision has led to pretty incredible results, where even today you're able to share this information, where I really hope athletes and really anybody in general takes note of, because this is about self-actualization. It's about being the best performer that you can be, whether you're an athlete, a coach, an attorney. We're all performers, and you want to perform at your best. And I guess from what you're telling me is we've got to take a step back and look at this holistically, and even from the mind, body, spirit connection that most of us are not really diving into.
Well, so well said. Very eloquent. And then also, if we get to know our horse, really get to know your horse, Jung says that if we fail to make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and it will call us fate. We will call it fate. So by getting to know your horse, you're getting to know these subconscious programs that are running. Why do you feel that you need to win so much? Is there something that you need to prove? Let's explore this. Don't pull out your Instagram. Sit down for half an hour and let's look at this. And maybe it ties into the instincts of your horse. So your horse is programmed to be in the group. Now, if we're not in the group, think the horse is for caveman days. If we're not in the group, our chances of survival go down. And our chances of reproduction go down, way down, because all the mates are in the group. We got to be in the group. Then we're programmed by nature to be high status in the group. Because the more high status we are in the group, the greater our chance of survival, because if we get injured, the group will take care of us. And the more high status we are, the better quality DNA we will get opportunities to partner with, so that our DNA in the future will have the greatest chance of surviving and reproducing. So we're programmed by nature to be high status in the group. Now, success in sport is equated with being high status. So that's one drive from the meat, unconsciously, subconsciously, I'll say. Then maybe your identity is wrapped up with this idea of yourself as an athlete. And if your idea of yourself is connected with this thing that you're doing, then naturally, the better you are at this thing you're doing, the better you think you are as a person. So there's an incentive there for you to love yourself. You need to have a certain level of success. You need to be worthy of your own love. And then maybe when you were 5, maybe when you were little, you received conditional love from your parents. You know, only if you did well did they treat you nice. And you got programmed from a very young age that you had to be worthy of love. And maybe you're still out there trying to prove to everybody that, hey, I'm worthy of love. Look, I'm good enough. Like me. And deep down, are you maybe trying to prove to your own self that you are worthy of your own love? Because there are so many champions out there. And many of these Olympic champions and these people, they are crazy people. The act of training that hard, that single-mindedly, was so unhealthy that it made them very sick. They snapped, they went crazy. And deep down, so many of these supposed champions still feel like losers. And no matter if they get whatever ring, Super Bowl, NBA, Olympic gold medal, world record, maybe they swim across the English Channel and back, they still feel like a loser. They're always trying to prove to everybody, look, I'm worthy of love. Look, I'm trying to be worthy of my own love. But if you really get to know yourself, and you realize, okay, I get it. I am perfectly imperfect. And to hold myself up to this illusion of imagined perfection, this ideal of perfection, is to cause an incredible amount of suffering, because as an imperfect being, you can never attain perfection. But in sport, to be good in sport is to focus on the goal, you know? You're not trying to be good, you're trying to be perfect. But if you get too hung up on that, you really start to make yourself sick in a mental level. And as you get too sick, you get burned out, you start to seek things that will make you feel alive. Now, how much time do we have? I want to know if to explore this topic a little bit.
That's really on you. It's 3:05 right now, so I can keep going, but I want to be respectful of your time.
I got time. I want to give a good message. So, very often in sport, we have to be hard. Like the Greeks used to say that sport is peacetime war. We're not out there just having fun. We're trying to beat people and not be defeated. Now, in order to do this in many different sports, it requires a lot of mental toughness. You have to endure. You have to be willing to take more pain than that other guy you're trying to beat. You have to be able to endure more than he can endure. You have to be able to go to places that he's not willing to go to beat him sometimes, or beat her sometimes. Now, the more you do this, the better you get at pushing yourself really far outside the comfort zone. And you do this regularly, day in, day out. It makes you very hard. And what happens is you start to turn off a part of yourself that feels the pain. And by turning off a part of yourself that feels the pain physically, you can push yourself. And let's say you're doing this for weeks. You start to turn off the part of yourself that feels the mental suffering. You stop judging that something is hard. You just do it. No questions asked, just do it. Now, by turning off the part of yourself that feels the physical pain, you're turning off the part of yourself that also feels the pleasure in the little things in life. And by turning off the part of yourself that judges that things are difficult and that things are very hard, you're turning off that part of your mind that judges when things are really good and that when things should be enjoyable and how beautiful. So you end up desensitizing yourself in a very, very profound way. And you start to go through life like robot man or woman. You're not feeling anything. You're always in your head, just in the plan, just going. And you can do incredible things. But at the same time, because you're not feeling anything, you start to not feel alive. And nothing.
You're existing.
You're not really there. And we talked about health on a physical and mental and spiritual level. This starts to make you sick, mentally sick. So you start to seek out anything that will make you feel alive. And that sometimes it's thrills that are unhealthy. Maybe it is unhealthy addictions. We've seen that like this happen to like Tiger Woods. There's so many examples of this, that people who just have been so tightly wound, eventually they snapped. Michael Phelps, Tiger Woods, so you can go on and on and on. It's just literally it's the rule, it's not the exception. And you'll go after these things that give you a brief feeling of being alive. But it fades, and you go after them again and again and again, and you get into this pattern of being sick and wanting what's bad for you, which makes you even sicker, which makes you want even more of what's bad for you, and you start to spiral down and you cause your own destruction. I'm not just talking about like, oh, I'm going to lose in the championships. I mean, you're going to lose at life. You're going to destroy your health. You're going to be on the street. You're going to be in addictions. And the thing is, as you go lower and lower, you get more and more unconscious and less aware. So the more sick you get, the less you know that you are sick. You think, oh, I'll quit this bad habit. I'll quit this addiction tomorrow. I can do that. And it's because you're so sick that you're so unaware that you believe you can quit. And it's got power over you. You don't have power over it. You're just getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and spiraling down. So we see this happen to so many athletes, and we talk about mental health, but not many people are really looking at the big picture of like, no, by being too crazy about it, I'm making myself sick. So in pursuing the sport, you need to have a balance. You need to also do what's good for you and seek medicinal things. Maybe going and training in the basement gym is going to make you physically stronger. But maybe you might feel more optimistic and enthusiastic about life if you went outside and did some calisthenics and jumps, or grabbed a tree branch and did some pull-ups. And you go back home and you feel a lot better about life than if you were training in that basement gym with no windows. That was making you sick, even though it was making you physically stronger. So we need to start to view everything that we're doing as medicine or poison. Is it helping me up, or is it pulling me down?
That's a great way to look at it, medicine or poison. And you mentioned balance, which I think is key in every aspect of life. But from an athlete's perspective, and you clearly with 5 Olympics, you've done a hell of a lot with the sport. And you've even mentioned it wasn't healthy doing that. But how would you communicate that to athletes nowadays who really are aspiring to get to the mountaintop? And from their perspective, there's only one way to get there, and that's going complete commitment to your craft and really making a lot of sacrifices, which not just your body. Yes, you're tearing down your body, but you're also sacrificing a lot of mental health in the meantime. So what's your approach on balance there?
Okay, now for this, I'm going to have to dig out some Ayurvedic wisdom.
Let's hear
Ayurveda,
it.
it means life knowledge. And it's usually used as medicine, but it's a way of understanding nature. Nature out there in everything and our own nature, so that we can work with nature for greater harmony and avoid working against nature, which causes disease, decay, problems. So Ayurveda is very old, and these classical texts are thousands of years old, and it's all Sanskrit. Now, Sanskrit is the most high language that we have. It has the biggest vocabulary of any language, and it allows for the greatest conceptualization of reality. The more words you have, the more power you have to think and conceptualize things. And they have words in this language for concepts that we don't have in English. And compared to Sanskrit, English is a barbarian language. Angles and Saxons and Jutes, these Germanic tribes came into England, and we incorporated a little bit of Latin and a little bit of French from the Normans. But that's it, it's a barbarian language. And if we look at Sanskrit, it's a language, an academic language of great philosophers and intellectuals for thousands of years. And they say that Sanskrit is a language that is a key to unlock a way of perceiving. So if we look at Eskimo, Inuit people, they live in an environment that's mostly snow. They have so many different words for snow. And because they have the word for snow, they can recognize the different types of snow. And if you go in the Amazon, people in that live in an environment that's almost totally green. And they have so many words for the color green. They'll say, this medicine comes from that color, the tree with that color leaf. But you and I, we would just think, oh, light green, dark green. I can't see that. What are they talking about? Well, Sanskrit has words to describe things that we don't have. And because they have the words, it unlocks a way of perceiving and understanding. And they've got words to describe energy. And there are 3 words I want to share with everybody. Comes from Sanskrit. It's like yoga and Ayurveda. And these words are, first word, it describes energy in the lowest frequency of energy. It's called tamasic. Tamas, and when you apply it to something, it's called tamasic. Then a little bit higher frequency of vibration, it's called rajas, R-A-G-A-S. And something becomes rajasic. We could describe something as rajasic. Then there's the highest level of operation, highest level of frequency of energy, and it's called sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A. Or something can be described as sattvic. So everything in nature is an expression of energy. Einstein, E equals mc squared, matter and energy are interchangeable. So this is like taking a quantum approach. We're going to start to look at the energy, the frequency of energy behind things, behind food, behind thoughts, behind actions, behind the way we train and the way we compete. Everything. And this will allow you to understand people and things, because you have these words. So I'll talk first about tamasic energy. It's the lowest frequency of vibration. So tamas, remember we talked about the holistic approach of health and sickness?
Yeah.
Tamas is sick. The energy of tamas is unconsciousness. It's decay. It's imbalance. It is passivity. It's laziness. It's unconscious instinctual behavior. So if I went to the house of somebody who's really tamasic, they would live like animals. They'd have chicken bones thrown underneath the bed and roaches running around and just garbage everywhere. And they'd be really unconscious. They wouldn't even realize it was dirty. And if you ask them if their place is clean, they'd be like, yeah, I cleaned it 4 months ago. It's clean still. What are you talking about? They don't even understand that it's dirty. They're just so unconscious. And they make decisions like animal people, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. So they want what's bad for them, which makes them even more sick and unconscious and tamasic. And they're physically unhealthy. They're mentally unhealthy. They're very weak. They have no willpower. essentially it's decay. It's the lowest level. And it's like drug addicts. It is, you know it when you see it. There are places in the world where this type of energy seems to be predominant, like Haiti, for example. Everybody's on the lowest level, kind of survival. And a tamasic person would be very sick, but they wouldn't even know they're sick. And in an army, the tamasic people would be like the foot soldiers. No disrespect to foot soldiers, but in terms of a relative comparison between generals and officers, foot soldiers would be the tamasic guys. And in the army, they don't allow the foot soldiers to make decisions for themselves. They get told what to do, where to go, wait, get up, charge, march. They even get told to run into things that will kill them. They're not entirely self-aware and they're operating on instinct. Okay, so let's look at Rajas now. A Rajasic person, if I went to the house of a Rajasic person, the house would be all about impressing others. It would be a huge house that's kind of impractical. They don't need all that space. And maybe on the piece of land, it's all house and just a little garden. And inside the house is full of pictures with them and this politician, pictures of them and a big fish, pictures of them doing something amazing, skydiving, or like them and the championship trophy. And everything is about impressing other people. And
it's
the house,
ego-driven.
Ego-driven, yes. And the house is cluttered. It's full of things. Every shelf has got some sculpture, some carving, some thing that is just stuck there. These people have an insatiable appetite to just accumulate. And the house is full of things, material possessions like crazy. And it's all about like showing off. And a Rajasic person would be taking every single supplement they ever heard of. They'd be popping like 11, 10, 12 pills a day, taking all these supplements. And they'd be training with this a lot of energy is there, but the energy is not focused. It's not intentional. They'd be like, well, I need the six-pack. So they're taking all the supplements to get the six-pack, and they're training, and they're getting up in the morning and running before work and drinking coffee, and they're exhausted all day. And then they're like, well, I need to train again. So they're going training, and they're on their way to burnout. It's unsustainable. And in the terms of the military example, the officers would be really Rajasic. It's like the general wants us to move and do this thing, and the officer has to plan how he's going to do the thing on the smaller level. Well, he's going to try to impress everybody with how a great commander he is, and he's going to yell and scream at all the foot soldiers, and he's going to charge. He's going to do whatever it takes to get a promotion. He really wants that promotion so bad. He wants to prove something to everybody. And he's going to be really pumped up about everything. So Rajasic would be like you would push yourself towards these imbalances, and then you get sick. And then you'd go and you'd take like a Rajasic means of healing yourself. You'd go and take a lot of pharmaceuticals. And as we all know from those commercials, they're all the side effects of the pharmaceuticals. So then you get the side effects, then you take pharmaceuticals for the side effects of those pharmaceuticals. Or you go and have some extreme procedure like a surgery, and you're like, okay, well now I'm healthy or whatever. But Rajas, as a rule of nature, always, always, always leads to tamas. So the weeds that grow the fastest die the fastest. Rajas by nature is kind of unsustainable. And the more Rajasic something is, the more tamasic it gets. So I mentioned I trade cryptocurrencies. I look at this crazy phenomenon unfold, and I see Rajas, greed, ego, desire, quickly become tamas, unconscious instinct, fear, sell. And the more Rajasic something gets, the more tamasic it becomes. And this is behind stock market bubbles. And Rajasic exercise, okay, so tamasic people are lazy, unconscious. They're probably not exercising very much. Rajas would be like CrossFit. I just need to get the many reps. I need to show everybody I'm part of the group. I'm doing it. I'm strong. I got pecs. I'm squatting a big weight. But those people some of them are not going to be able to move their furniture when they're 55. Their knees are destroyed, their back, neck, cervical spine. It's unsustainable. They're just destroying themselves for this ego of like, oh, I have to do this. This is the workout of the day. I need to do it. And if you're training and you get too excited, you come in full of like, you're listening to all the pump up music in the car, you get to practice, so pumped up, you drunk a lot of like pre-workout, you're just crazy, you're ready to go. You have all this energy, but you can't focus. You can't execute your details. You're not entirely aware of like what's going on. There's just so much passion and desire. And if you really want to look at rajas, people who might pursue a career that they don't like, and they're pursuing this career and they're slaving away every day and they're miserable and they think, when I get that corner office, then I'll be happy. When I get that Benz, then I'll be happy. When I buy the lake house, I'll finally have it made. And they work and they work and they work and they work. And they are never happy no matter what they are consuming. It is an insatiable appetite. But very sadly with these people, they suffer terribly. And they have miserable lives because, number one, they're working as a slave. They're overworking, overdriven, imbalanced. And they trade their health for these material gains, and maybe they do have that lake house, but they've had so many kidney stones, so many operations, so many ulcers, so many bouts of chemotherapy and radiation therapy if they're still alive, that they're so sick they don't have the capacity left to physically enjoy the things that they have worked hard to earn.
They use that wealth to recover from the damage they've done.
Or they will spend it all just to survive. So as a rule of nature, the way the universe works, according to these ancient wise men, rajas always causes tamas. So if we think of training, many times in my career, I got a little too rajasic. Too much energy, too much desire. I wanted to be great, and I overworked myself. On a big picture in terms of a season where I'd overtrain myself and just destroy. And I would swim slow. I'd be so exhausted. Or in the gym, I'd be like, I need to be the best today. I need to be stronger than I've ever been. And I would push myself very hard, and then I'd have to spend 4 days being like weak and sore and stiff and recovering. And I went through many waves like this. Would go rajas, tamas, rajas, tamas. Now, let's talk about sattva. So if we went to the house of somebody who was really sattvic, it would be a very kind of practical home. It's not designed to impress anybody. It's designed to make it feel good. And it's going to incorporate space as an element of design. Have you ever seen Japanese architecture?
I have. It's beautifully.
Yeah, the space is like the Zen. Zen is sattva. Taoism is sattvic. The space is not designed to impress. It's designed to feel good. It's designed to conserve resources. It's efficient. And instead of a million different things showing how great the owner was, there might be just one vase on a cabinet that had a beautiful flower. And because it was only one flower, you really noticed it. And you paid attention to it and you appreciated, like, wow, nature is just magnificent. And you understand nature is the greatest artist. I'm not going to try to like paint a picture that is so great. Oh, back in the painting a picture, tamasic, you wouldn't do it, but rajasic, you'd paint some art that's all about impressing other people. You try to do what other people think is great.
And you feel empty in the process.
It's fear. It's fear of not being good enough. So in this house of the sattvic person, they would incorporate nature, like Balinese style, garden. It feels good. It's not about impressing everybody. It's clean, it's practical, and simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's perfect, it's simple. And when you're tamasic, you don't really understand anything. You don't know what you're doing. You're just reacting like a scared or greedy animal. When you're rajasic, you have a lot of desire. Well, I want to do this. And very often people get impulsive and they take a big action without really taking the time to carefully observe and understand how the system as a whole, with all these integrated parts, works. And they don't understand how by taking this action, I'm going to cause a cascading effect all the way over here. And they don't understand what they're doing really. It's like do the action. But when they act out of rajas, it causes a lot of unforeseen repercussions. Rajas causes tamas, right? And then they have to put so much more energy into sorting out all the problems that they've created by impulsively taking action. But sattva is where you understand the whole system, how all the facets fit together. And you understand if I take one little action, I don't need to do a huge thing. One little action, I know how every piece of the system is going to react. And I will wait and wait and wait. And then at the perfect time, I take the perfect amount of action, no wastage. Everything is efficient to produce the greatest effect by working in harmony with the system, in harmony with nature, my nature. And a sattvic approach to health would be checking in with your organism all the time, and would be preventative medicine. Like, prevention is better than the cure. A stitch in time saves 9. Like, there's this common wisdom of this. So it would be preventative medicine. So if I'm getting a little mucousy and I'm a little bit like sluggish, then I'll take some foods that are more heating and drying. If I'm getting a little hot, running hot, dry scalp, my skin is a little dry, my lips are a little bit chapped, I'll get some food that's really moistening and nourishing. And I'd take care of my immunity and my digestion. I would do more sattvic things, which is preventative medicine, preventative exercise, mobility, yoga, especially pranayama is probably the ultimate. It's divinely genius. I just can't get enough of it. And in terms of the military, we use the foot soldier example and we use the officer example. So the foot soldier is running on instinct. Generally. Officer, he's running on ego. Now, you don't want the guy who's in charge of the whole war operating from instinct. That would be very bad. We'd lose. And you don't want the guy who's in charge operating on instinct and wanting to prove how brave he is, because we'll have so many unnecessary casualties. Sun Tzu says the highest form of war is to win without fighting. He says, first, you want to attack your enemy's plans. Then, if you can't attack your enemy's plans, then you have to fight the enemy. And he says, worst of all is do siege warfare. So we want the general of the army to be the one who understands how the whole system works. We want the general to be the most self-aware, the most aware, like in terms of situational awareness. We want the most conscious man as the general. So when he takes action, he understands how everything fits together, and he waits to the perfect time. Then he takes that perfect, efficient. Now, Sun Tzu says that if you don't know yourself and you don't know the enemy, which sounds like tamas to me, you already lost. He says that if you know yourself, but you don't know the enemy, you might not lose, but you won't win. That's like ego. I feel strong today, let's go. But you have no idea how strong your opponent is, or where your opponent is weak, or where you're weak. But if you know yourself and you know the enemy, Sun Tzu says, you will win. You've already won. So the greatest general knows exactly where he's weak. He knows his horse. He knows his organism. He knows where it's strong. He knows where it's weak. So he knows to bring out the strengths. He knows to mitigate the weaknesses. And when he takes action, it is not impulsive, it is not unconscious. It is healthy action, where he wants what's good, which makes it better. So sattva and health go together. And health is power, it's willpower, it's strength. And in this way, like let's say the general would have a bunch of swordmen, and he's fighting some big barbarians, and they're much bigger and stronger than his swordmen. But he has some great archers. He'll keep his swordmen back and use his archers instead of charging in with big ego, like, I'm going to prove them, I'm going to show them, or an unconscious animal guy who doesn't know what's happening. So when we operate in terms of our sport now that we understand a little bit about sattva and rajas and tamas, if we're tamasic, you're probably not doing sport. You're lazy, you got health problems, you're not there. Sport generally is very rajasic. I want to prove, I want to win, I want to show everybody how good I am. The act of competing is rajasic. But oftentimes Rajasic is fear-based. I'm afraid of not winning. The act of wanting something brings the fear of not getting it. So when you want something too much, it makes you afraid to not get it. And when the moment comes, wants and fears makes desperation. Rajas and tamas is desperate. So if you're sattvic and you're competing, you won't be competing to begin with. You will be practicing an art form. You're operating out of love instead of operating out of fear. You're enjoying it. This is an expression of who you are. And when you're training, if you're training in a tamasic way, you're destroying yourself, you're injuring yourself, you're staying up too late, you're getting up too early, you're burning out, you get injured, you're going to get sick. If you're training in a rajasic way, you're on your way to burning out, you're on your way to getting injured, you're overtraining, you're doing too much, there's too much ego. It's like, well, the paper says I need to do this much. And I need to do that much, and I believe I have to do it, so I'm going to do it beyond what's actually good for me.
You're not listening to your horse at that point.
Yeah, but if we're sattvic, then we say, okay, well, what is the perfect amount? And how is this perfect amount going to make me adapt in the way that I want to adapt? It's very careful, it's very clever, it's perfect, it's very conscious, and it knows when enough is enough. It's like you don't want to overfill the cup. That's so much wasted energy. Let me just do the right amount. Let me save that energy for next time and recover. So the sattvic approach would be like slow and steady, like the trees that grow the biggest are sattvic. Slow and steady. And a rajasic approach is this. Weeds are rajasic. Grow fast, die fast. Rajas, tamas. And most sporting careers are like this. Rajas, tamas, rajas, tamas, rajas, tamas. But if you take...
It's a wave of inconsistency.
Yeah, it comes in waves. You burn out, you need some time to recharge, recover. I burn out again, put out too much energy. But sattva, remember we said it's the highest frequency. It's perfect. It's where you control the emotion instead of the emotion controlling you. And of course, the general, sometimes he needs to be angry and yell at the officers. He's in control of his emotions. His emotions are not in control of him. So the sattvic approach is slow and steady and patient. Patience, because remember, if we get too greedy, too excited, that's rajas. And then if we look at everything we do, if our lifestyle habits are in alignment with nature, going to bed early, waking up early, the way nature intended, that's sattvic. Because if we sleep during the day, our body is like a plant, Ayurveda says in many ways. If you look at flowers, they tend to close up at night. Leaves close up in some trees. In our body, the same way, our channels all close up. So if we're eating too much at night, our digestion is going to be really weak. And in the morning, our body's supposed to open up with the sun, just like a plant. And if we're sleeping in too late in the day, our body's not allowing, we're not allowing ourselves to open up properly, and metabolic waste starts to accumulate so rapidly in our body after the sun comes up. So you want to make sure you're going to bed early, waking up early. Now, when we're eating, if we get so hung up on this idea of protein, and I need to have this much grams of protein, you can get protein from many different sources. You don't need it all from one source at one time. And if we're eating, we have to remember, a sattvic approach would be to understand that it's not how much we eat that counts. It's how much we actually digest. So if I get rajasic and I love this food, oh my gosh, I'm not really in control of myself. My emotions are in control of me. And I eat too much food, I overwhelm my digestive capacity. And I don't have enough enzymes and stomach acid to properly break down a full stomach of food. And my digestive process is really inefficient. And I'm actually going to absorb and transform and assimilate much less of the nutrients in that meal. But if I eat 3/4 of a stomach and I still feel okay, then I will have enough acid and enough enzymes to fully transform all the food I've eaten and build it into like powerful muscle. So by eating a little bit less, you gain more muscle. That's that sattva approach. That's that balance. And you'll be more healthy. overwhelming your digestion is like putting too much wood on a fire. The fire gets weak. The metabolism gets overwhelmed. It gets weak. So if the flame gets weak and I put more wood on the fire, the flame gets even weaker and the rate of burning the wood slows down. So your metabolism gets weak. You start to get fatter faster. Your immunity gets weaker. So it's very important to take care of your digestion. And the sattvic approach, remember, it's preventative medicine. It's taking care of ourselves so we don't actually get sick. Whereas rajas is just doing whatever we want and then getting sick and then trying to do something. So we take sattva and it has to become who we are. We have to become sattvic. And that means everything we do will be like the highest level of excellence, of mastery. And it will be expressed in the way we speak, the way we live, the relationships we have, the way we compete, well, the way we do our sports. I won't even say compete, the way we practice our art form. It'll be an expression of us. Our life can only be an expression of us. So remember, sattva is health, and tamas is sickness, and rajas is a kind of mixture. You got some healthy ideas and some sickness, and it's not really focused.
So finding balance.
It's everything. It's the food you eat. Food can be tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic. Processed, dead food, meat, things that come out of cans. It's tamasic. It's got no life energy in it, really. Very spicy food. I don't know if you've ever had a bunch of spicy Mexican food, then gotten into traffic, and you felt like, oh, I need to go. Come on. Ah. That's the rajas in the spicy food. What you put in your body, you put in your mind. But sattvic food would be more like vegetarian, fresh food. Some spice to help digestion, but not too much. And the more you eat sattvic food, the more sattvic you become. And the more you're in a sattvic place, the more sattvic you become. So Haiti would be a good example of tamas. New York City would be an example of rajas. In Haiti, you're worried about survival. In New York City, you're worried about being cool. You're worried about being high status. You're worried about impressing people. LA, you're worried about impressing people. Let's say you lived in Costa Rica, or you lived in Bhutan, in the Himalayas, or Bali, or Switzerland even. That's more sattva. Germany would be very rajasic. Go, 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 work, work, work. Switzerland, it's very fine, careful work. Watches, chocolate, finance. Or very often, if I was to get rajasic as a trader, I'm just going to destroy myself with my ego, or I feel like I need to do something, I need to make a move. That's an impulsive decision. I need to really understand the system as a whole, how all the pieces are working, and then very often my work might be resisting the temptation to take action, so that I can wait until everything is lined up and then I take the perfect action for the expected, not even the hoped for result, the expected result, because you understand the system. And a good coach is a sattvic coach. He understands how much is enough, how much is too much. And if you want to take ownership of your own life, you got to understand that balance. You don't need to go to extremes. What is the sustainable, healthy approach? Where you make decisions which make you more healthy and more strong, which make you think in healthy ways, which makes you want what's good for you, which makes you even more healthy and more strong. And a sattvic way of sport, of life, would be to cultivate this upward spiral. You're getting higher and higher, and as you get higher, you have more self-awareness, more situational awareness, more self-control, more willpower, more capacity for greatness. You're more of a hero of your story. This is victory energy. This is life energy in its totality. But if you don't understand and you operate like an unconscious animal, the sick culture will make you sick. And you'll get defeated. You have defeat energy, decay, laziness, passivity, weakness. You speak to yourself with language that poisons you and makes you weak, makes you doubt yourself. And you're going to spiral down into just slavery and mediocrity. And today, mediocrity is slavery. We don't like to admit that most people live as slaves, but they do. And only when you're healthy do you realize how you were sick. Only when you're sattvic do you realize, oh my God, I used to be so rajasic with that thing. oh, I was even tamasic in that way. Because as you get more healthy, you see how you're sick. So you can consciously change with more willpower that comes with being more healthy to make yourself even more healthy. But once you get sick, you don't even understand what's happening. You're just spiraling down.
And you're almost, I mean, I could speak only for myself, but I'm on that journey as well. And I've got a long way to go, as most of us do. But you also look back with gratitude, saying, okay, I went through these experiences and I learned a lot. And yes, I was so many different ways, especially as an athlete. I'm similar to you. I kind of went all out to where my body almost, well, not almost, it did start breaking down on me. And, you know, I would get angry with my body. Like, why can't you hold up for me? Why can't you do that? But really now, as a 34-year-old, I knew exactly that's what you were talking about. And as the horse rider, I wasn't listening to my horse. And, you know, in retrospect, it's easy to sit there and blame the horse. No, not at all. The horse did exactly what I had to do, and I abused it in a way. And I think a lot of athletes do that. So when you talk about balance, it resonates with me. And I'm sure a lot of athletes and really people that are listening to this podcast right now, hopefully they're internalizing that and being able to reflect and say, okay, this is areas of my life where I need to slow down. This is areas of my life where I need to step it up and ultimately meet that balance.
You say it in an even more simplistic view that's very helpful. Is this medicine for me? Or is this poison for me? Is this pulling me up? Or is this pulling me down? Is this making me more healthy and more strong? Or is this making me more sick and more weak?
Well, beautifully said. I actually wrote that down now. I'm going to share that with the teams I work with, and it's a simplified way to answer it. I think it was beautifully stated, and really everything you've shared today on this podcast, incredible. I wish we could talk more about this, and perhaps we'll even have another session in which we could dive in deeper, because this is a concept of not just athletics, but life. And again, like we said earlier,
will be an expression. So the more healthy and strong we are, the better our athletics will be. But that means, once again, I just want to reiterate, that means you got to look at your lifestyle in terms of medicine or poison. You got to look at your relationships in terms of medicine or poison. Your diet, medicine or poison. All the supplements and all this consumerism and the wellness, like, really get a grip on it. Let's go back to work with nature. Let's take the Sattvic approach. You need to look at the language you speak to yourself in. Is it medicine or poison? You got to look at your habits. Are you escaping from life in Instagram, or are you looking at educational things that teach you things on YouTube instead of illusions on Netflix? Are you situating yourself in a place that is medicine or poison? Because your environment is medicinal or it's poisonous. Is your environment bringing out the best in you, or is it pulling you down? And if you take this holistic approach and you consciously try to cultivate an upward spiral, it doesn't matter if you get injured, you break your leg, you'll recover faster, you'll come back stronger. And very often we only train the body. That would be a very tamasic approach. Now, if we take a Shaolin monk approach and we train the body, we're training the horse. You're training the horse a lot. Everybody's training their horse. But who's training the rider of their horse? Because the more sattvic you become, the more of the rider you become, and the more skillful rider you become. So you can do all these physical exercises. Those are great, but they're exercises that come from Hermetics, that come from Raja Yoga, where you train your mind. And the mind is amazing because it's not like a muscle. Muscle needs time to recover. You have to feed it. You have to rest it. The mind can improve exponentially fast. And many people are training their organisms. That's great. But the more you train your mind, the more you train your rider, the greater capacity your rider will have to push your horse further and further outside of its comfort zone. Because remember, the biorobot, the Homo sapien organism, it's like a horse. And if my rider is good enough, my horse will give its last breath for my rider. And the more you're able to push your horse further and further outside the comfort zone, the faster your horse will adapt. So it'll be easier to do next time. And a sattvic approach is to be a masterful rider. A tamasic approach is to be just a dumb horse that thinks it knows everything. It's instincts.
That's, wow. What a way to put it. And I think I've been guilty of being that dumb horse in my career. I think a lot of us have. But upon reflection, even just hearing you share your story and really insight on this, I hoped that I'd hope that a lot of athletes really take this to heart, because, had I known this earlier, who knows what my career could have been. Had you have known this earlier, maybe it would have been 6 Olympics or 7.
No, the Olympics is just that's mental and physical slavery. It's the first reality TV show, but I don't want to get into that.
Well, I appreciate it.
A simple exercise to train your rider. Take an object that you're very familiar with. Set a timer on your phone. Set your timer for 1 minute and try and choose to think and see in your imagination that object, and only that object for the 1 minute, and push away all the other thoughts as they come. Because what control do you have over yourself if you can't control your thoughts? So if you choose to see what you want to see, this will eventually grow into thinking what you want to think and feeling how you want to feel. And you start with 1 minute, and then you bring it up to 5 minutes. And then also throughout the day, set an alarm every hour, 1:22, 2:45, a random number that reminds you to check in with your organism and say, how is my organism unconsciously reacting to its environment? Is it stressed? What's my body language doing? How am I breathing? What's my tongue doing? What is my face muscles doing? Is it medicinal state or a poisonous state? And every hour, start to practice checking in with that reminder from your alarm and opening your body language, breathing your organism, relaxing the face, even turning the corners of your mouth up, a quarter smile, an eighth of a smile. And that sends a very powerful signal to your nervous system that says everything is okay. And the opposite is very, very true. A little bit of a frown sends a very powerful signal to your nervous system and your brain chemistry and your emotions that everything is not okay. So the more you start to cultivate this self-awareness, the more you start to grow it. And you can't be a good rider of the horse if the horse doesn't listen to you. And if you want the horse to listen to you, you have to first calm the horse. So it's not freaking out and trying to survive, where it's actually going to be in tune with the rider. So check in with your organism, relax it, and practice this mind exercise until you get to 5 minutes. And that will give you a level of that's like the first grade. And it'll be very useful because not many people, everybody's in kindergarten. But if you can focus on that thing that you want to see for 5 minutes, that's like first grade. And you'll be like a first grader playing with kindergartners.
Level up. There you have it, folks. That's impressive. I hope that we all try this exercise. I know I will. I think it's incredible for mindfulness and really just, being more aware of ourselves, because I've been doing a lot of meditation and that's been helpful in so many regards, but I also know that that's just scraping the surface. So these types of exercises, please share them with me offline. I'd love to share this with our listeners via social media. But thank you, George, again, so much for your time. Incredibly insightful. The swimming legend, George Bovell.
Thank you. If you want to find me, I have I'm not really that active on social media, but it's georgebovell.live on Instagram. And I think it's just George Bovell on Twitter, but I'm just there as a presence, more of a spectator than anything. But if you want to reach out, that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you again, everyone listening. I hope that you enjoyed this session with swimming legend, 5-time Olympian, former world record holder. The list goes on, but as you can see, he's far more than an athlete. We appreciate you joining, and we look forward to chatting again. George Bovell, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Danny.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's conversation. Please take a moment and share this episode with a friend, rate us 5 stars, and check out Restoic.com if you'd like to learn more. If you're new to the podcast, stick around. You're going to learn a whole lot more, and we appreciate you listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.
What's a strong body without a strong mind? Today, student athletes report mental health and wellness as their #1 challenge. Amplified by a demanding culture and social media, the pressure that athletes face has never been greater. And with the difference between skills, strength, and athleticism growing smaller, the world's elite athletes have begun journeying inwards to gain their competitive edge. Driven by sports science, Restoic is a resource for athletes at all levels who seek to train like the pros and optimize their performance through mental skills training, ranging from audio programs and meditations to our nationwide network of mental performance coaches. We serve mindful athletes by providing balance, bringing their energy and focus in alignment with their goals. Train the mind, the body will follow. Elevate your game at Restoic.com.
Remember, kid, there's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Follow your heart, kid. You never go wrong.